Okay, well, Karen, thank you for joining us today for our global thought session. I appreciate it. And I think I'm looking forward to learning more about Bound International and what you do with COIL. And I believe our participants will as well. That's why they're here. So thank you very much. I know you have a lot on your plate as well.
Yes, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. And the more we can continue to talk about things and learn from each other, the better off we're going to be fighting our way out of this kind of the situation that we're all in.
Yeah, no kidding. I think we're all ready for the situation to change. Um, just a few quick housekeeping rules. I ask everyone just to remain muted. And if you have questions, Karen will take them at the end of the session. We're going to have a question and answer session at the end. But if you do have a thought or a question that you just can't hold any longer, that's fine. Just send it to us via chat, and I will direct that to her, and she'll answer that. And this is going to be recorded so that it will be available to you all after the session's over. I'll probably get it out to you tomorrow. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to you, Karen, and I'm going to stop my share so you can start yours.
All right, thank you very much. Let me share my screen here. And I will, let's go to, here we go. All right. I hope everybody can see that. It has been probably 20 years exactly, or maybe 21, since I've actually been to the Brandenburger Gate. And funny story, I was standing there one night with a friend when she looked over my shoulder and gasped, and I said, "What?" And we turned around, and the Mitterrand, the Prime Minister of France at that time, was getting out of a car, walking into one of the buildings right behind us, and I never would have noticed if she hadn't been there. But it's really nice to be here. Again, I really appreciate Tom inviting me here in partnership with Abrodia, and we'll talk a little bit about who I am in my experience and why have I been tapped to talk about this, but also perhaps some things to be thinking about going forward when thinking about faculty-led programs. I know a lot of people were sort of hoping. I know my last place of work, University of Dayton, where I worked with for several years as their Director of Education Abroad and Partnerships, we're really looking forward to summer 2021 to be the launching pad out of what happened in 2020. And I think we're all realizing now that this is going to take a little bit longer than we thought. And there's some really critical things that we need to think about too, as a result of kind of what's been happening here. So we don't need to read over my bio, but just a few highlights. I've been in international higher education for 16 years. I have worked for 2 third-party study abroad providers in my career. I actually got started at API because they were based in my hometown of San Marcos, Texas at the time. They are now in Austin, Texas. And I've also worked for the Education Abroad Network, which at that time was based in South Bend, Indiana. They are now in Chicago. And I have worked for Lorenzo de Medici, which is a lot of you maybe have heard of it. A lot of students study abroad in Italy there. I worked for their North American office, and I've also worked for a large public university in the US and a mid-sized private. So I like to think I have a lot of different perspectives and experience in looking at study abroad and also faculty-led programs. And I had different roles with each of those in putting those programs together. As I mentioned before, I was most recently the Director of Education Abroad and Partnerships at the University of Dayton in Dayton, Ohio. I actually moved to Texas to work remotely before it was in fashion, so to speak, when the pandemic hit. So I've been here ever since. And my company, Bound International, is like what I like to call my quarantine idea. It was founded last July, and quite literally was something I didn't even think about until the pandemic hit, and maybe kind of reanalyze how we do things in the field. I also just want to share that I've also been a returned Peace Corps volunteer. I have been an international student. I earned a degree abroad. So I do have a lot of experience looking at international education from different lenses. And I've overseen and managed in my 16-year career hundreds of faculty-led programs and thousands of students. So I'm very familiar, I have intimate knowledge of how they are built, how you recruit for them, how you manage them, how you run them down to the nth degree. So I hope that comforts a lot of you who have joined here today, hoping to hear from somebody that has a lot of that experience. And I'd love to hear your experiences as well when we get to the question and answer. So, let's start here, right? Let's take stock. And I'm moving my window around, so if my eyes kind of wander, definitely don't focus on me, focus on the PowerPoint. But what changed, last year? I think that the answer is pretty obvious, but to break it down a little bit more, what did we lose? Let's start there, or those perceived losses. We certainly have a lot more financial anxiety going on in the field, as many of you who work in study abroad offices know. Study abroad is very unaffordable to a lot of students. And it's not just in the United States, the wealthiest country in the world, where the overwhelming majority of students in college do not study abroad. And probably one of the primary reasons is finances. But any country in any region in the world, nobody is sending half or a majority of their students abroad. And that was prior to this most recent economic collapse. So now you have an added layer of financial anxiety. You have families who are struggling financially, or who are now looking at the money they do have and saying, should we be spending it even on college, or should we be spending it on study abroad? Certainly institutional anxiety. Some universities are going to be recovering financially, others are not. Those that are, like families, are wondering how they should best use the money that they do have. All of a sudden, there's a little heightened anxiety around, okay, we have some money, but where does it go? Knowing how it kind of disappeared all of a sudden a year before. So that's another layer to consider. Notions of travel security. With the rise in terrorism has been going on now for several years, but now quarantines and swan tests and people not wearing masks and being cooped up on a large tube for hours with different people, and different cultural approaches to the pandemic wherever you're going. Now there's another layer of travel security, and people who want to travel who might be questioning, is it still the right time for me to do that, or should I wait? And I know that parents too, we're much more hyper. I'm a parent myself. We're much more hyper when it comes to our kids. When we're younger, we feel invincible, but when you're a parent, you now are going to maybe nudge your students away from traveling again, maybe for another year. Certainly quarantines and regulations per country, they constantly vary. I think in December, many universities or countries in Europe decide to shut down again through May, Spain and France, and they're trying to tackle these things with their internal infrastructure in different ways. So for those short-term faculty-led programs, if you're facing a program that is going to also involve a quarantine period, you might wonder if that is worth investment until that is really lifted or alleviated somehow. And then certainly pricing fluctuations by tour operators, everything from the airlines to hotels to vendors providing tours abroad. Everybody wants to get back in business, but with all the losses and the uncertainty, it's probably a little bit of the wild, wild west for these people to price every day what they can offer and what they're going to do. But what did what maybe motivated us though as a result of this? Many of you probably have seen or experienced yourselves really encouraging tales and stories of institutions and of people really persevering at a really tough time. People have lost jobs and regained jobs. People have moved into different industries. But what are some of those motivations that maybe came out of this? So certainly, I think taking for granted our desire to connect with people. Where would we be if this took place when I was in college, when the internet was extremely new and emails were extremely new? They looked, almost clunky compared to what they are now. Yes, we have Zoom and we have FaceTime, but just to be around people, just think about when we don't have to wear masks anymore. We're going to have to recondition ourselves to walk into a store and not panic that we don't have a mask on. I mean, that's how our psyche's been affected. We need to be out and about. Yes, people are kind of venturing out a little bit to restaurants or parks and things, but I mean, if you work in our field, when was the last time you traveled internationally? If you're used to doing that, and all of a sudden it's been a year, 2, 3, there's a real yearning to be out and about and not just in your local community. The next line is something that I've read about, that kind of influenced my decision this past spring, which is newspaper articles and social media really lighting up saying, look at the skies over Los Angeles, look at New Delhi, blue skies, you can see the Himalayas, it's not photoshopped. And people thinking, well, we stopped traveling for the most part, for 2 months or only 8 weeks, and look at the difference that we made. And I think that chemical impact is actually not as great as we think if when scientists do the measurements of air quality, but social media is very powerful. Those images have been very powerful. Like, look, we can reverse this maybe in weeks or months. Just even that notion of climate conscious people was a big deal. We want to help economies rebuild. We're all in this together, especially your local economy. You don't want to take for granted your local coffee shop anymore or restaurant. Neither do people in Florence, neither do people in France or in Delhi or in Sydney. You really want to help those economies rebuild. Institutions want to earn revenue again. I know for a fact the last place that I worked, a lot of revenue came in from study abroad programs. And maybe your institution doesn't get a ton of revenue for study abroad, but I'm sure it's something. Maybe the revenue you earn runs your office. So that's really important. It funds scholarships to get those students who wouldn't travel to go. So people want to be earning money again. They appreciate the funds a little bit more in times like these. And then what we have learned is that international connections online, yes, we want to connect and we want to travel, but they're actually not that bad. And, again, think of where we would have been 25 years ago had this happened, and no internet, no FaceTime, or very, very new internet, no Netflix, none of that stuff. And those online international connections can be very meaningful. They kept businesses running, they kept classes going. I can't even imagine if I'd have been out of school and not playing sports for a whole year of my teenage life. It would have been unfathomable. And I know kiddos are hurting right now, but they have a lot more than we would have had if this had happened 25 years ago. So we're learning and adjusting a little bit to these new realities about connecting online. So one of the things I want to talk about with regards to faculty-led programs is that faculty are, they're the academic leaders of faculty-led programs. They're teaching their courses. They're tailoring or working with the study abroad office or the third-party provider to tailor the trip around the curriculum, hopefully, because the curriculum should drive all aspects of the trip. They are the cheerleader, they're the motivator, they're the caretaker. They have a big responsibility when they're taking students abroad. And so when we think about collaborative online international learning, COIL, the faculty really get to still retain that leadership role. And COIL, for those of you that don't know, has been around for about 15 years. It came out of the SUNY system, State University of New York. And it was a way to connect classrooms through technology and connect them meaningfully. It has evolved a lot since then. It was not ubiquitous prior to the pandemic, but when everybody started moving online, and I mean everybody in the world started moving online for everyday operations, then COIL is getting another hard look. And I think that's something faculty need to consider. I know that there are faculty that are disappointed their programs were canceled last spring. Last spring, I literally had a law professor who was at the airport getting ready to fly to Prague when UD shut the program down, and she had to turn right around and come home. And I know faculty miss those experiences as much as the students. But this is a great opportunity as you're kind of waiting it out to see if you will be leading students abroad in the near future. So COIL is, there is a specific learning pedagogy around it. You don't just turn on a camera or have students email each other or hang out on TikTok or share TikTok videos. I mean, there's a lot to it. in terms of how you prepare students, how you have them build trust, get to know each other's culture, engage in intercultural learning, and then work on a project together. And so they learn how to work on teams globally, and how they navigate different perspectives when they have to meet a goal academically or eventually professionally. So there is a pedagogy around it. However, the faculty still drive the curriculum. There's two ways of doing it. Faculty can either teach a course they've always taught on campus and then just pair with a faculty member in a similar or complementary course abroad, and then they decide what those shared learning objectives and activities are going to be. Or they could create a whole new course together that is co-taught and co-designed. So faculty are still in the driver's seat with regards to curriculum. It's still their area of expertise. And this time they get to really co-develop a course with an international partner. I always enjoyed in international affairs pairing faculty with peers abroad, either through professional development trips or conferencing, or when they come to my office and say, I had met a guy a couple years ago at a conference at the University of Lagos, and he's awesome. We've been in touch. We want to do something together. That really opens up a lot of opportunities. So not only do they get to co-design and co-teach together and combine their classrooms, but who knows if this person could be someone they could do joint research with in the future, or a joint publication. This is a colleague and a peer abroad, and I know faculty want those connections as well. And faculty get to co-teach international students. You don't really get to do that on faculty-led programs. At UD, we had a couple of programs where we actually had a host university, a partner university abroad, design 1 to 2 weeks of activities with our students on campus as part of the faculty-led program, and they brought and invited their students along as well. And those were the most successful programs. Students having those connections with their peers is really important. And for our faculty to get to know and to teach and maybe mentor some of these students from another culture is a really great asset to have, and a really great opportunity that if you just take American students abroad, or wherever you're coming from, there is a little bit of a limitation there, because you're kind of moving around a little bit of a bubble by design. More students can actually participate in COIL. This is the thing. With the majority of students not going abroad from anywhere in the world, especially the United States, that paradigm really changes. It almost inverts when you go to COIL, because students are here. They're taking classes. They also, the majority of them have internet access and have Zoom, as we're finding out. Not all of them. There are some issues there. But I think the United States sent the most students it ever had before abroad in 2019, before the pandemic, about 350,000. And that's not even 2% of our college population. And those were during the economic good times. So we really need to rethink about access. And this is a great way to access students, because there are students in Ghana and Mexico and New Zealand that are also not going to study abroad. And why can't they have those meaningful connections as well? Why can't they engage with people abroad in a structured setting and of higher learning, rather than maybe bump into them on Facebook at some point? This is a much better opportunity. And so faculty really broker those important social connections amongst students as well. You get to be there almost in a diplomatic fashion, as well as a teacher. You're teaching subject matter, but you're also brokering these great relationships. I mean, the students, I would say the younger millennials and the Gen Z students now, this is not one way that they communicate, which is online. It is how they communicate. It is how they create friendships. It is how they search for jobs and do job interviews. This is their territory. This is their turf. Brokering those relationships, these are individuals that one day, might decide to attend the same graduate school together. They might work at the same company. They might work for similar organizations, and now they can say, and they get into the workforce, oh, I know somebody who works in business over in France or in Paraguay. We took classes together, just like as if they studied abroad for a semester or a year. You build these connections and you stay in touch through social media, and they don't ever leave. They don't go away. And so, those are important resources for students to have. Another nice thing is there's much fewer health and safety risks and responsibilities. Now, I'm not saying, and we all know, we have read horror stories online of people didn't know the camera was on, ... But let's face it, when we have anywhere from 10 students to 40 at UD, we had some faculty-led programs where we had 45 students. We had 3 faculty, but 45 students. and you're trying to get them across the street in Barcelona and onto the subway and over to the museum. And at night, you know, they're going to go out and eat, and you're just wondering if you're going to get one of those phone calls. And I have certainly dealt with faculty members who got those phone calls, or we got them, and dealing with embassies and police stations and hospitals. I have been there. And I have also welcomed students overseas for on-site orientation and give them 24 hours and something's going to happen. I mean, I've seen it, right? So there are these risks and responsibilities. I know faculty like to teach and to motivate and inspire and stay laser focused on the curriculum, but the reality is when you take students abroad, there's a lot of responsibility that's added to you. Faculty would frequently ask us as they're being trained to take students abroad, you know, well, what is my responsibility and what is the students? What if they do this? What if they do that? What if this happens? Am I liable? We would get those all the time. So at least think that if you're teaching online, other than the embarrassing or strange thing that might happen with another student or yourself, that there are much fewer risks involved in teaching students online. Also, as a lot of you, you know, your faculty have found out this past year, that I'm sure it was extremely painful converting online on a massive scale within months or even weeks to finish out the spring semester and then going into summer and fall. But I think what we're also finding is a lot of faculty kind of, not all of them, but a lot of them liked it, or they realized, wow, there's a lot of things you can do with this. You know, I have talked to faculty who have said, I kind of like this. Once we get back to normal, whatever that is, I might advocate to continue teaching some courses online. So there's a lot of creativity that can be used for technology. And again, you are teaching technologically savvy digital native students as well. So this is also an area of comfort for them. This is how they show their creativity, by being online. And so how are we speaking to those students? I like traditional lecture format, but I was socialized that way. So I'm kind of an old fogey that maybe needs to step aside and let the younger faculty and the more creative faculty take this on. And then faculty develop good project management skills. COIL typically involves a project at the end of the experience. And so it could be co-writing or co-authoring a paper, but it could also be a lab that they have to do somehow through technology. It could be, you know, they have to do research at an NGO, collect data or field studies or field samples and write a report together. So how do you as a faculty member learn how to manage a project like that and do it virtually? So those are a lot of benefits that I think faculty can have if they're kind of converting over to COIL versus the traditional faculty-led programs. Now, one thing that we were doing at the University of Dayton, and that some other people were doing as well prior to the pandemic, that I think is going to be maybe a good transition point once we sort of work our way out of this, is what I call, I'm not saying everybody calls it this, but COIL plus travel. So what we found at UD is that if we had students take a semester course and either it was COILed or not, but we somehow managed to squeeze in a 10-day or even 3-week trip in the middle of the semester or at the end of the semester to culminate a project or an opportunity. That aided faculty in a lot of ways, less risk. They're already teaching a course that's on the books. More students got involved because they have to take that course anyway to graduate. And they also got more involved because if a trip is short, it's more affordable. At UD, we have, you know, some of our 5-week programs to Europe where students were going to have to look at paying maybe around $15,000 to cover the entire experience, tuition, flights, spending money, everything. And then these programs we had one with our history professor, who's a Russian expert. And at the end of his spring course, the students traveled to Russia for 2 weeks. He's native Russian speaker, has lots of contacts, so it was very seamless. And that trip was only going to cost students about $3,000. So you think about the difference between $15,000 and $3,000. And here's another added benefit, is that if that travel portion, where it's scheduled and tied into the course, it can also be covered by financial aid. I know that those summer faculty-led programs Either students use up all their aid before the summer, and so they can't afford a summer program or have to dig deep into their pockets to do it, or they have to cut back a little bit in the fall and the winter and the spring to have enough to fund or partially fund that summer trip. But if this is actually a part of a spring course, it goes as part of their spring load for their aid. So they can pull out a little bit extra, a little bit more aid to cover that program. So the travel portion, there are some that think that maybe we should preempt the course with a trip. It could be in January before a spring course, right after Christmas, let's go somewhere. And then the rest of the course is really unpacking everything and framing the trip in an academic sense. It could also be in the middle of the course. We have some schools have spring break or fall break, and that's usually very short. Maybe you have a week and you might be limited, like maybe going over to Morocco or Asia when you only have about 5 or 6 days of legitimate travel is not the best idea, but you could do that. And then certainly in the spring or over the winter, you could tie on travel that could be upwards of 2 or 3 weeks. And then when you do this, that trip is reframed. It could be an achievement or a closure of a course or the launch of a course. You do a whole semester of learning, and if it's at the end, then maybe that trip just brings it all together. Now you're actually in country looking at what you studied, interviewing people from there, business owners, museum managers. Maybe if you're doing a COIL, you connect with the students you've been COILing with the whole semester, you get to meet in person. And it could be purely cultural and social. It could be when we meet, we're going to do some fun things, but also to close out the course for everybody, you're going to do your joint presentations on your project that you've been working on the whole semester. So there's different ways of doing that, and it really helps you reframe that trip. And again, it's more affordable because it's going to be shorter as well. And then, financial aid can apply. And I also know that in working with faculty, we would sometimes lose what I thought were really good faculty who kind of in theory wanted to take students abroad. But in addition to all their responsibilities, they felt like, well, I can't leave my house and my 2 small children and my dog and my plants, for even 4 or 5 weeks. It's just a little too much. But a 10-day to 2-week or 3-week trip, it's almost like traveling abroad for a conference. I think arrangements can be made a little bit more easily when those are short. That's a short amount of time. So that's something that I picked up as well with faculty, is that this could also be more appealing to faculty who can't commit a lot of time away from family and homes, is having these shorter trips and tied to a COIL course, really integrating it all together. And what a fabulous way to do that, to have these students meet somewhere or to exchange them in a more affordable way while they get to really spend the majority of a semester or trimester together through technology. So something else to consider is that when we are getting back on airplanes and we're filling those seats and we're getting our 20 students to Rome with Professor so-and-so to teach art history or business, this pandemic, I can't remember who quoted it. I don't know if it was Churchill or somebody, like, never waste a good crisis. Here is an opportunity to build back better. I know a lot of you might have been hearing this in a lot of different ways, economically and socially and so forth, but it is an opportunity because if you tell people afterwards, well, we tried this and we tried that, and they'll say, well, why did you do that? And all you have to say is, well, it was 2020 or it was 2021. And that will translate. It was the pandemic. This is what we did. This is how we adjusted. This is why. This is how we shifted. And I think there's a lot of forgiveness there for things that especially went well, or that maybe you tried that didn't really take off. But I think we really owe it to ourselves and owe it to the planet and to this generation of students now in college that rate this climate crisis, very highly, to rethink how we're traveling in general. And one of the things we do at Bound International, the principal thing is really building an office between sustainability professionals and study abroad offices and international program professionals. And there's a lot more to that I'd be happy to go into, although we have our own webinar about what we do coming up later this summer. So I don't want to take up anybody's time on that. But what are some ways that faculty and students, principally faculty and study abroad offices, can start working on to structure programs differently, to travel more sustainable, and also how to get student buy-in. So some things to consider about traveling more sustainably. I have that here. First of all, one thing we don't think about, I mean, the majority of our carbon emissions, for example, come from flying and ground transportation, right? The combustible engine model of travel is what we've got. It's pretty amazing. It helped us put a rover and a helicopter on Mars here recently. But we know better than ever now, these are finite resources. They're harming our planet. They're harming our way of life. I'm in Texas. We got snow last week, 4 or 5 inches. That's unbelievable to me that happens. So these weather events are increasing. So flight paths and weight actually make a difference though too. If you're flying 2 or 3 different stopovers in cities to get where you're wanting to go, you're actually emitting a lot more carbons through that kind of inefficient travel route. Some ways there's no way to do it. You can't fly direct from the United States to India, I don't think. You'll probably have to stop in Dubai or Europe. But if you're going to Europe, if you're going to Latin America, if you're going to the Caribbean, we are a little bit at the mercy of the airline industry, but those direct flights do make a difference. The weight of the planes make a difference. So luggage and looking at flights that are filling up. How do you have conversations with airline companies about this, who are getting a little bit more savvy in controlling these issues? Also, your group size. We think, well, let's get as many students on the program as possible, or it's just so popular. You have to think about the impact of the communities you're visiting, especially if they have fragile ecosystems. And you might not always think that they have fragile ecosystems. You can't assume that so long as you're not in the global south, an ecosystem is not fragile. A community is not fragile in terms of their resources they have to offer to tourists and to students. So is it the best thing in the world to try and get 40 students down to a smaller area in Costa Rica, trekking through the mountains, getting on a tiny bus and getting up through the hills? These are not environments that are well equipped, either environmentally or geographically or socially, to accommodate that level of tourism, even though the juxtaposition is they do rely a lot on tourist dollars. Or pesos or whatever it is. So be more mindful of that. Really take a good look. And that's why I say location, location, location. Take a good look at where students are heading. And don't assume that, 1 million people can go to Florence every summer and Florence will be fine. Florence is a small city. And if you haven't ever noticed or been there, that in the summertime, when you walk around like the Duomo or the Ponte Vecchio, all you hear are American voices. Florentines really get out of Dodge in the summer because they're just overwhelmed with the amount of tourists that come through. And also think about things like consumption. There are places in the world that when you are there, because of how their food is processed, how their water is sourced, there is less consumption going on by design. And so, in fact, your carbon footprint is much lower if you just spent time in some of these countries. So be thinking about group size, fragile ecosystems, and location. Be more mindful of those communities that may seem like they can host as many people as possible or large groups, but maybe it's better if they don't. And how do you navigate those conversations? Vendor selection. So whether it's tour guides or the restaurant near the hotel that you're going to go to a lot, or the restaurant in the hotel. Be thinking about these vendors. Are these locally owned and locally run businesses, which is really going to help the local economy rebound better? There is a social justice aspect to things. If you're staying at the Marriott, if you're eating at a swanky restaurant, odds are a lot of those profits are not making their way back into that community, and also somehow makes those local vendors even more reliant upon tourists because they get so little. But that's all they have. And so if you have more direct engagement with these vendors, I think that that's important. Also, do some of these companies or businesses that you're working with, do they have sustainable business plans? What does that mean? Do they have eco labels or lead lighting or green labels? What does that mean? What are those legitimate labels and standards that are out there that a lot of these companies are involved in to show some efficiency? And I bet if you talk to your sustainability offices or officers, they can tell you what some good indices are in looking at quality and what does a sustainable business mean and how do we know if somebody's acting sustainably. Those are some good conversations to have with your sustainability colleagues. General tips on sustainable travel, try not to use single-use plastic items, try to shop local, support local culture and heritage events. There are different things, and I can share some of those with Tom afterwards to share with you about how to do that. Themed programs. Study abroad is important. We're not trying to replace it or shut it down, but how about we create more programs that look at the climate crisis? There are more and more popping up. They're taking place in Russia. They're taking place in Iceland, in Nepal. They're taking place in Europe, looking at local policy and infrastructure. Your geology and biology students going to the Caribbean or to Latin America to study bioreserves and conservation areas. Why don't we have more of these programs available to students as well? Because I think you'll find that they're very eager to do so. Offsets and onsets. So what are they? This is another good conversation to have with your sustainability office or officers. So offsets are out there. That means, hey, I'll pay some money to plant some trees, maybe over in Myanmar or here or there, and then I don't have to feel so bad about flying. But there is controversy around offsets because that's a very transactional point of view. How is it really helping local communities? What involves, choice of community? And also there are some offset brokers out there that don't have the best reputation. And also if you pay a fee, maybe only 50% actually goes to the project you're supporting. Onsets is a novel idea. If you look up Earth Deeds, they're an organization that engages in onsets. That means that they build into the cost of programs. They do a social cost of carbon for each traveler on a program. And whatever that cost is turns into a fee. And then students and programs have a choice of where they want to invest those monies, including locally, to help offset and more meaningfully some of this travel. And then finally, pre-departure and education. We work really hard to get intercultural learning and education in our pre-departure materials and activities and in our brochures. And then our reentry programs are kind of here and there. They're not as typical as pre-departure. So why don't we also try to get in there education and awareness around the impact of travel? Because for one thing, it's important for these students to be able to articulate with confidence and with some savvy about the impact that their travel, any kind of travel, is having on the environment and how they become more mindful travelers. But it's also an opportunity to reinforce that this is important, that study abroad and travel still needs to take place. So you're not advocating for one at the expense of the other, you advocate for both. And you strengthen that argument by making it explicit. And that's one of the things that we do at Bound International as well. We're creating a bunch of resources for study abroad students and offices to orient themselves around sustainable travel, how to be a study abroad student responsibly and sustainably, how do you put together programs differently, maybe with onsets and so forth. So these are all ways that faculty and their study abroad offices and also sustainability offices can really get together on and redesign these programs and rethink these programs coming out of it. Here's our opportunity to say, we don't just have to do it business as usual, we can make a difference. So that is all that I have. And one of the things I kind of emphasized at the beginning of this, and I know Tom will reinforce, is that we really do want to hear from you as well. Not just comments or questions about what's been presented here, but things that are taking place on your campus, things that you've heard around the digital stratosphere, about what people are doing or should be doing. I think this is a really good opportunity to ask some questions, and I know I will do my best to answer them as best as I can, and Tom as well.
Thanks, Karen. We'll get started with the questions, but I do have a poll here with some questions, and let's see what people are thinking in terms of what ideas they'd like to do, where would they like to do lead a COIL program, what discipline, etc. So we'll have to see what they say. It's interesting that you mentioned Earth Deeds, because Daniel Greenberg is a member of our board of advisors, so he's helping us. He's helping us with our sustainability project here, and for some reason this just
Oh,
closed.
I'm sorry, that might have been me. You shared on my screen and I'll leave
Okay.
it up. I won't touch it. Sorry,
Okay.
everyone.
No, that's all right.
It was
Sorry.
probably me.
I was gonna say that was really fast, but
Yeah, so you're working with Daniel Greenberg. He is with Earth Deeds, and
yes.
does have a really good onsetting program, and he does work with groups, faculty-led, corporate groups, personal. I mean, he could really. That organization works with a lot of people to calculate that social cost of carbon and help orient people around how to maximize some investment. In these different communities and around the crisis through the program itself.
Oh, very good. I think that you're right. That is the topic, for education abroad moving forward is sustainability. Because it's an issue now of population or overpopulation, and the scarcity of resources and things like that. So let's see. Right now we have well one. Okay. Well, now we have some. All right. Uh, okay, good. Actually, I do have a question for you, Karen, from Victoria Malone. She says, "How do you bring up I'm sorry, how do you bring up environmental awareness to students who are not already thinking about that?" That's a good question.
Yeah, don't be intimidated. Hey, use the strength that students have. Students are very, millennials and Gen Z, they are very concerned about the climate crisis. That doesn't mean that they're experts though. They just know that something's up here and it's bad, and I feel like no one cares except us, and I want clean drinking water, and I don't want like to deal with 40 hurricanes a year in where I live in my part of the world. So you can't always assume that they're experts about it, but also be thinking about how you do reach them. This is a great way to partner with the sustainability office. This is what they did their degree in, just like matters around intercultural and multicultural learning is your wheelhouse. Bring those two things together, create a campus plan or a strategy, a marketing campaign, advocacy. How do we talk to students and how do we reach students? Remember, a lot of these students get snippets of information online. That's how they communicate. So you don't have to teach a course. You don't have to do anything really elaborate or fancy, but how do you reach them? How do you increase that awareness? And when you do have their attention, what is it that you want to convey to them? Is it stats? Is it what kind of stats? The social ones, the geographical ones? There's water, there's electricity, there's food, there's trash, recycling, composting. Where does it go? And so be thinking about what you want them to know, and don't be intimidated by it either. I think the crisis is too big. My background is in education, intercultural learning. I'm an intercultural trainer, but my degrees were in archaeology, specializing in Celtic studies and Irish studies back when, let's say, Bill Clinton was president. So, anybody can transition into this. It's important. It's really important. You don't have to have a science degree to do this. And if you're worried about that, set up a coffee or chat with your science people, your professors that teach this, the sustainability office. Look in facilities and management. The people that are running the cooling and heating systems on campus and the electricity, they are right in the thick of this. So talk to them about how can we create awareness in a campaign, and how do we have good conversations with study abroad students, and certainly our organization will have resources as well. So firstly, again, don't assume that they are experts, even though they're concerned about it. But if they do have a lot of savvy, why not invite them in about what they think, what they know, what concerns them the most, and how do we get on this journey together? And I don't think that you'll face a lot of blowback from students. I think if you try to come across as an expert and you don't have good information, that's where you're going to get in trouble. But so long as you don't position yourself that way, I think you'll be fine.
Okay, very good. It seems like everyone has already completed the questions. So I'm going to end the polling, and then I'm just going to share the results so you can at least see. South America and Europe, are top destinations, and pretty much it's an even distribution between humanities, social sciences, and STEM. Certainly we all would like to see more STEM programs involved with COIL, study abroad. So that's good. And then this was my question. I was really interested in learning a little bit more about. It's like, what's the biggest perceived challenge to leading a COIL course? And the two biggest ones are experience, knowledge, and international connections. And I think that's probably where you come in very nicely, Karen, you and Bound International, in terms of providing these things. Could you speak a little more about, we've talked several times and you've talked about how you offer training for faculty that would like to do COIL. Could you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so there's a few things that we do in our mission to Abound International to promote international academic mobility and environmental sustainability at the same time, and how to build a bridge effectively between those two professions and activities. I've talked about how we're going to have a lot of different resources that we're probably going to make available starting at the beginning of the summer, that are resources for study abroad students and offices around education and action and development when you're thinking about study abroad or study abroad programming and being more sustainable. But we also do have a collaborative online international learning program. We have what we call a full service high impact program. Prior to the pandemic, COIL largely revolved around 2 or 3 faculty would maybe travel somewhere to do 2 or 3 days of training on what it was, pay a fee to do that and the travel costs, and then being told, okay, go back to your campus and build it. And we all know how that goes. Even if you have champions on campus that want to do something, how much of a challenge can it be to build something out, to gather resources, people, money, time, policies? It just takes a while. So what we do, and I've been involved with COIL for about 4 years now. I was at the University of Dayton, worked with our School of Engineering to launch the very first COIL program or cohort. I think they're in their 3rd cohort now, but I was there when they started the first one, and I brought that international partnership and intercultural training lens to the program. So what we do is we just tell universities, you know what, just send your faculty to us. We'll get them on the road. We'll get them going. We'll get your courses COILed. We'll get your faculty trained, and you don't have to wait a year or 2 or longer to get this built out. So we have a formal training program, probably a maximum of 8 to 10 hours to respect faculty's time and commitments. And then we have, we do it kind of twice a year. We have a fall and spring program. Our next program is going to be for fall courses, and training will start in April and maybe go through May. Meet once a week for 4 or 5 weeks. And then after that, several optional training sessions for a deeper dive in a certain topic. So the formal training is around what is COIL, what's best practice, what's the pedagogy around it, optimal design, experiential learning theory, project-based learning theory, intercultural competency, and how do you teach it? How do you teach intercultural learning without being an expert, so to speak? And how to use technology creatively to engage your students online as well. So we do that formal training, and then we do once a week optional training after that for faculty. They work with their faculty partner. We can find them a partner abroad, or they can bring one that they already have that also wants to do this, but they just don't know where to start. And they'd go through the training together, work with their partner after the formal training, with a coach, which we also provide, which is somebody who has experience teaching, probably online teaching or with COIL or intercultural teaching and training, that's somebody there that can mentor you and guide you through developing your syllabus and your project and your assignments, and working together and putting everything together before the class actually starts in August or September. And for our spring cohort, they train in about October to get ready for January or February. We also do intercultural assessment of students pre and post their semester of learning, because we need to build up a lot of data, good data around intercultural learning and shifts amongst students that do COIL versus those that physically travel. We might find some interesting things. We also assess the faculty when they start training, and at the end of the course, we assess faculty, because this is a faculty development opportunity as well as a student opportunity. So we train faculty to see what their intercultural learning is like and how that's advanced through this whole process. We create what we call plug and play curriculum. You know, we create ready-made curriculum in intercultural learning and teaching, how to teach off of the assessments that they're taking, how to orient students and have conversations, maybe how to grade assignments, things to keep in mind. And we'll be creating sustainability education curriculum tailored to different subjects that they can use as well. So we make that ready to go for them, and we train them on these subjects, and we also guide them in how to use these assignments that are ready-made for them. They don't have to go out there digging up assignments from elsewhere. They don't have to figure out how to create their own assignments in an area that they're not that familiar in. We provide that. We also do a program report at the end of the semester. So for our spring COIL faculty right now, we will create a report at the end of the semester for not only them, but their universities that really is kind of diagnostic in nature. It talks about what the partnership was, who they were, their project, what the course or courses entailed, the intercultural competency scores of the students as well as the faculty. Names are removed, but they're there. An evaluation of the program by the faculty, students, and coaches. And it's put in a nice little concise report that can be shared with international programs offices, so you can see what happened. You know, you hear so-and-so did a COIL course with someone somewhere, and you want to know what happened, who was it, how did it go, you know, and we will provide that because I come from largely an administrative background. I have taught at the collegiate level, but I'm not faculty. And so I know I appreciate finding out what's going on interculturally or internationally across campus. And so I think this will be a great benefit to those offices. So we really just need faculty to put up their hand and for their institutions to support them and say, yes, I'm going to send you so many faculty or this one person to your program, so we can get a COIL course on the books this fall or next spring, and we'll get a faculty member trained or several of them, and we do all the work. The home university, if you're figuring out how to build a COIL program, or you're not ready yet, or you're not sure how things are going to go, but you think you want to do this, why don't you allow us to help build that capacity and that knowledge capital too, that comes with faculty training, and get some courses on the books right away that are COIL, so students are getting these opportunities. So that's in a nutshell what we do, and I'll make sure Tom has information to share with everybody about joining our COIL program and what it entails, and how to do that after this is over.
Great, thanks, Karen. Now the floor is open to any questions. Does anyone have any questions? Just jump right in.
Or if you did something great at your campus and you want to share it, or maybe it was a disaster, I don't know, feel free to share that as well.
Everyone's quiet, it seems. Well, in any case, everyone, you have Karen's email address. It's karen@bound-intl.com. And the website is www.bound-intl.com. You can see on the screen all the social media, their platforms they use. I encourage you, contact Karen directly. Ask any questions. Like I said, this is we're all in this together, and this is an exciting project, COIL. So thank you all for joining us. And Karen, I think I'm gonna share something here. I'll finish this off. Let's see. We just have a couple announcements. Our next speakers coming up, I'm very excited about. We have Mariela Salaveri and Gonzalo Villarreal from Bolivia. They are part of a wonderful new and innovative theater group called Malacaracol Teatro. And they employ a lot of theory on the symbolism of masks. So that really looks exciting. That is going to be March 17th at 3 p.m. And then after that, we have Ana Rivas is going to talk to us about how she and other artists manipulate space using various experiments for people. That's going to be on March 31st at 2 p.m. And she will be speaking to us from Germany. And then we also have one more exciting one. We're still working on this, but it's going to be April 6th. I'm sorry. We are going to have another debate. We hosted a debate in the fall, but this one's going to be between Milton Bennett and Mark Salisbury, and Dr. Anthony Ogden is going to be the moderator of that. So make sure you just follow our page on broadia.com to learn a little bit more about that. And then that's it. And then I will send this recording once we're done. Again, Karen, thank you very much for your time, and thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you found this informational. It's a valuable resource. Karen's a valuable resource, and I hope you do right with her and get the ball rolling. If you have not led a program abroad before, or a COIL program, this is a wonderful way to start. And I am getting a chat message from someone. Hold on, let's see. Okay, great. Well, thank you, Mauricio, and thank you, Jordan, for your messages, and Lisa. And again, thank you all for your time. I will be sending you this recording tomorrow. Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Carry on.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Take care.
Bye-bye.